That down out of the way, let's move from garbage to underappreciated. You know, one of our viewers wrote in the other day, asked me a question about something related to a Pixar film. And they said, and they kind of added on the end, by the way, you know, what do you think of the most underrated Pixar films? And here's why it caught me the right way. Because when you think about Pixar films, it's hard to think of something that's underrated. They're such a celebrated practically a franchise, but they're such a celebrated studio and the stuff they've made. As a matter of fact, don't pull this up or anything, Jonathan. If you go to the Rotten Tomatoes meter and say, go down to starting at the top, the highest rated Pixar film. So Chris, I'm going to give you a bit of trivia.
Okay.
The number one highest Rotten Tomatoes Pixar film. And then you go to number 2, which will have a slightly lower Rotten Tomatoes score. Number 3 is slightly lower.
Okay.
What Rotten Tomatoes score do you think the number 19, the 19th highest Pixar Rotten Tomatoes score is?
Well, they're all great. So I don't know, like a 75?
91.
Seriously? Pixar's
91.
Good for them.
Is the 19th highest. The
That's
19th
awesome.
highest critically rated film on the Pixar list. If you go down to number 20, it becomes 88%. 88% is the 20th.
Pure trash.
That's just how great Pixar is. So it's tough to pick out things with Pixar that one would consider underrated. Now, I'm going to give you my list of what I think are the 5 most underrated. And by underrated, I want us to get a baseline definition for underrated. And underrated is a very subjective thing, but underrated to me is where its success and general reputation is, and how big the gap is between that and how good you think it is. So there's a lot of movies that was successful and has good reputation and you agree, but that's not really underrated. But then there's something that can have a certain level of success and reputation, but you think it's like way more than that. That's underrated. So let me give you my list of 5 most underrated Pixar films. I'm going to start at number 5. Soul. Now, one of the big reasons Soul is so drastically underrated is because it was one of the victims of Bob Chapek's "let's dump our Pixar films on Disney Plus." And so a lot of people never saw it and whatever. Now, I'm not saying this thing is Toy Story 3, but it had depth to it. It had absolute depth. It wasn't afraid to ask big questions. And at the same time had that Pixar heart and, no pun intended, soul. It was a beautiful film that whenever people bring up conversations about Pixar films, nobody brings up Soul. And I get it because a lot of people never got a chance to go see it, but I think Soul is a really wonderful film. And so it's my number 5 most underrated. My number 4 most underrated. And a part of the reason I think this film doesn't get talked about much is because it came out literally 1 week before the pandemic shut down the movie theaters. Tom Holland, Chris Pratt's Onward. This is a beautiful movie. Now, I'm a Dungeons and Dragons player, so a big part of this movie is Dungeons and Dragons, but it's also a very heartwarming, special movie about 2 brothers who lost their dad when they were both young and who are on a quest to try to get one more day with their dad. Mark W. in the live chat is saying, Onward broke me. It almost broke me too. Because I was sitting there with Anne, and of course you got my wife Anne and Ray are brother and sister. And it wasn't terribly long after we lost Anne and Ray's dad. And we didn't know what the movie was about when we sat down to watch it. And as they're going through it, like, Ray, you should have seen Anne, man. I kept on looking over at Anne. And she was both happy, like super happy, but ugly crying the whole movie at the same. It totally broke her, but it was a beautiful kind of broken. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I wouldn't be ready for that movie yet. I still haven't seen it, but I will.
Again, I'm not saying it's Incredibles. I'm not saying it's Toy Story 3, but it's a very underrated movie. It's a truly wonderful little film, and I really, really enjoyed Onward. And no one ever talks about Onward. No one ever brings up Onward. So
I
that's
keep
why to
forgetting
me,
that's a Pixar film. I always, whenever
Exactly.
you say it, I always think it's DreamWorks. Even when
it looks
Jonathan
like a
was,
DreamWorks film.
yeah,
doesn't
I was
it?
like, wait, isn't that DreamWorks? No, it is Pixar and Disney. Yep.
All right. That's my number 4 most underrated Pixar film. My number 3 has people who saw it loved it. But the reason I'm putting it on my most underrated is because I never hear it brought up in any conversations ever when you start talking about Pixar films. Coco.
Really?
I never hear anybody bring up Coco.
Oh, my friends love this movie.
Do they? Good.
Yeah. And it's at Disneyland. There's like a whole big thing with this at Disneyland, so that might also
Is
be.
there?
Yeah.
Well, I don't go to that crap fest anymore.
Yeah, you know,
Screw Disneyland.
might as well be called Beetlejuice Land.
Well done.
I'll call it Beetlejuice Land. But I remember I went into Coco and I remember the first things I said coming out of it, because there's no way I'm going to appreciate fully like all the references and the deeper meaning of Mexican heritage and stuff like that that's in it. Because I said, I know about as much as true Mexican culture as Taco Bell knows about true Mexican cuisine. So it is what it is, but it didn't matter. It transcended. And even though it was about these Mexican families, I felt a lot of the similarities to Italian families and all this kind of stuff. And it's, again, bigger questions and gets into a lot of grand things, but at its heart, so emotional and beautiful. And at the end with Coco, who doesn't cry? At the end of this movie, this is a beautiful, wonderful top 10 Pixar film to me. And I don't believe it gets talked or given nearly as much credit it deserves. So my number 3 most underrated Pixar film is Coco. All right. Moving on to number 2. Again, another victim of the Bob Chapek, let's dump our Pixar films on Disney Plus. The film that should have won the Best Animated Feature Film Academy Award, Turning Red. This movie does not look like much on its surface. I fully agree. Does not look like much on its surface. But once you start watching it, and granted, unlike, say, Coco, I did feel a very personal connection to this one because the movie takes place in Toronto, Canada. So I'm like, I recognize these neighborhoods. But this, again, it's just a beautiful movie about family and traditions and the roles of parents and kids and the rebellious stage that kids get into. And I certainly remember mine and all that kind of stuff. And by the end, I just think it's a beautiful, absolutely hilarious movie that I completely adored and thought was fabulous. Again, I don't think it's a top 3 Pixar movie or anything like that of all time, but I do believe it's tremendously underrated. So for me, Turning Red, my number 2. My number 1 most underrated. Remember, we're talking about underrated. I'm not saying my number 1 best Pixar film. And I don't even think this film is quite as good as Coco, but I think it's more underrated. Elemental. Elemental is this little film that came out at the absolute lowest point for Pixar. A bunch of their films had just been dumped on Disney Plus, devaluing Pixar films. And then when Pixar did come out with a film, we got Lightyear, which not a lot of people liked. And then after that comes Elemental. It's not a sequel. It wasn't part of a franchise. It was a totally original film. Nobody recognized the characters or anything like that. And it came out at Pixar's absolute low point. And I can't remember. I got to look it up here. But its opening weekend was terrible, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
The opening weekend for Elemental was $29 million.
Yeah. Everyone thought that was going to be just like, that's Pixar now.
Yep.
You know?
Mm-hmm.
It came out to an abysmal $29 million opening weekend. But then something incredible happened. Word of mouth started to get out about it. And even though it opened so pathetically low, this movie went on to make about $500 million at the box office. Because word just kept spreading. And people started going back. And they started going back bringing new people with them. It is a beautiful, and it's also a very smart movie, like talking about the immigrant experience as well, which means a lot to me. I'm a child of immigrants, right? Like my dad came over on the boat with his dad. And so there was something very, very real, very special about that. And then I'm going to go on a limb and say this. I think this is the best animated rom-com ever. I think it's the best animated rom-com ever. I think it's touching and beautiful. And oh my God, the song in it. I've been humming it all day. Dun, 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 dun. I mean, the song, by the way, go look it up. It's called Steal the Show. Look it up on and just listen to the song. It's beautiful. It's wonderful. So again, I think, these are not my list of what I think are the 5 best Pixar films. These are the 5 that I think are the most underrated. At number 5 is Soul. At number 4 is Onward. At number 3 is Coco. At number 2 is Turning Red. And I think the most underrated Pixar film is Elemental. Anyway, guys, we want to take a second to thank a sponsor of today's episode, Miracle Made. Guys, it's hot outside and your nighttime bedroom temperature has a huge impact on your sleep quality. So if you wake up too hot or too cold, I highly recommend you check out Miracle Made's bed sheets. Miracle Made sheets are inspired by NASA and use silver-infused fabrics that are temperature regulating so you can sleep at the perfect temperature all night long. There are just so many things that make these sheets so fantastic. We already mentioned the self-cooling properties for better quality sleep, but they're also self-cleaning. These sheets are infused with silver that prevent up to 99.7% of bacterial growth, leaving them to stay cleaner and fresh 3 times longer than other sheets. No more gross odors. So go to trymiracle.com/Campea. That's TRYMIRACLE.com/Campea to try Miracle Made sheets today. And whether you're buying them for yourself or as a gift for a loved one, if you order today, you can save over 40%. And if you use our promo code Campea at checkout, you'll get 3 free towels and save an extra 20%. Miracle is so confident in their product, it's backed with a 30-day money-back guarantee. So if you aren't 100% satisfied, you'll get a full refund. So upgrade your sleep with Miracle Made. Go to trymiracle.com/Campea and use the code Campea to claim your free 3-piece towel set and save over 40% off. Again, that's trymiracle.com/Campea to treat yourself. Thank you, Miracle Made, for sponsoring this episode. Chris, we've been talking about, it's difficult to talk about underrated films from Pixar
Yeah.
because most of them are really celebrated. But if you thought there were a couple of Pixar films that don't get quite the accolades they deserve, what would those be?
I have a few crossovers with you because Soul and Onward are on mine as well as Elemental. Elemental I thought was vastly underrated, and it was so beautifully done and such a great story. Also on my list, though, aside from those 3, I've got Luca. I love that movie.
Yeah, I remember you really enjoyed Luca
I
a lot.
love Luca. I think it's so charming. It's so lovely. It is about a coming-of-age story with 2 Italian merboys going into a little Italian
Merman.
town. They become mermen. It's fantastic. I love it so much. It's really, really great. They have this really great bit in there too about Silenzio Bruno, which is this whole idea of, any bad thought you have that tells you, no, you can't do it. You just tell that thought, Silenzio Bruno.
Yeah.
And it's been a really great teaching tool of just get that part of your brain out of there. Tell that guy to shut up. And then my other one that I have on here is Monsters University.
You know what? That is an
interesting.
underappreciated one.
It's a
Yep,
great
that's
one.
a good one.
And Pixar does this beautiful thing. Amy Newman and I have actually talked about this quite a bit. Pixar does this great thing about telling you to follow your dreams, but also it's okay if those change or pivot or you're not great at the thing you like.
Right.
And Monsters University is that so beautifully of, Mike Wazowski wants to be this great scare guy. He really wants to be the top scarer. And he's funny and goofy, and he works really well as this support system. And supporting people can be enough too sometimes. It's okay if you're not the best at something. And especially in, our current culture, or any kid who grew up as a millennial where you were constantly trying to be the best of something, and there were weird benchmarks for that kind of measure of success. It's really nice to have a movie that says, hey, it's okay if you just like something.
You know what other movie did that really well? Although I can't remember if it was Disney Animation or Pixar. But why am I freezing on the name of the movie? But it's a song where we don't talk about Bruno.
Encanto.
Encanto.
Yeah.
That's the same thing, right? That
Yeah.
same kind of theme about lifelong dream. It's okay if that's not what ends up being your future.
Yeah.
Something better might be out there.
Exactly.
For you. Yeah. That's really nice. By the way, somebody in the live chat, I lost who said it though. I brought up another movie that I totally agree with. I think Toy Story 4 is underrated.
Oh.
I think it is the fourth best the fourth best Toy Story movie. Like, I think 1, 2, and 3 are all better than it. But because 1, 2, and 3 are all better than it, I think people dismiss Toy Story 4. And I thought Toy Story 4 was really good. I thought that one was really, really good too.
I have a future underrated.
Uh-oh. How
Elio.
can you say
Elio,
it's
future underrated.
Okay.
Will be the most.
As it's a huge success.
Which
Who
one?
knows?
Oh, Elio.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Elio.
yeah.
What if it's loved? What if
Yeah.
it's not underrated?
No.
What if you hate it?
You can't love it enough.
Future.
That's the thing.
Underrated. I'm calling it right now, and everyone's gonna say I'm crazy.
See, some people are putting in like movies like Jason in the Live Chat saying Wall-E. Wall-E is not underrated.
That's one of the biggest ones.
Wall-E-
That's my
I love
favorite.
Wall-E.
That's
Wall-E
my
is-
favorite.
If anything, for me, it's overrated.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I do
I
think
love
that.
I love Wall-E. Wall-E is like fantastic.
Ratatouille.
But when I say overrated, it's still like on that Pixar like curve.
Yeah.
I still like it. I just don't like adore it. You know what I mean?
That's fair. I don't like the Cars movies. Those.
I
are
like the first
ones.
Cars.
The
And
first
then the
Cars
other
was
cars were like
okay.
whatever, and
I
planes.
didn't
I think
really
was
like
not
any of them
even
either.
Pixar.
Yeah.
I think it was Disney, but
My nephew loves.
See?
Kids
It
love
has some-
everything
they
to
had
do
something
with
for
cars.
everyone.
It's an incredibly toyetic franchise.
Yes, and that's why. And,
Makes
and you know what?
sense.
That Cars ride.
I love that
It's so
Cars
fun.
ride.
That's
That
pretty
ride is
good. That's a
great.
pretty good ride. I hate Disneyland. They can go.
Oh, but
effing
see, that's
burn
not
to the
Disney.
ground,
That's-
but that's a
that's-
good
yeah,
ride.
yeah.
Beatles
Oh,
and
Park
Plan?
Adventure.
Okay.
Anyway, guys, question is for you. What did you say are maybe some of the more underrated Pixar films? Again, most of them are really, really great, but what are the ones that you think maybe don't get enough credit that they deserve? Whatever you guys think, jump down into the comment section below and let us know your thoughts. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching this video. Make sure you like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe to our channel. And don't forget, we have a daily podcast called the John Campea Show podcast, available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your favorite podcasting app of choice. Go and subscribe to it today so it'll be there when you need it.